I listened to the voicemail in the dark. My mother's cold, jagged voice echoed through my tiny apartment. "We don't need you, Chloe. We'll live without you." I went to sleep feeling utterly orphaned. By dawn, my screen showed 76 missed calls. They were terrified, but I wasn't answering. If you had asked anyone in our affluent, perfectly manicured neighborhood in Oak Brook, Illinois, they would have told you that the Harrison family was the picture of suburban grace. My mother, Joanne, was the president of the local homeowners association, a woman who wielded her pearl necklaces and passive-aggressive compliments like weapons. My father, Richard, was a corporate architect who specialized in building beautiful facades, a fitting career, considering our entire family dynamic was structurally unsound and purely cosmetic. And then there was my older sister, Rachel. Rachel was the undeniable golden child. She was a former pageant queen with a blinding smile and a complete inability to face consequences. In my mother's eyes, Rachel was an extension of her own dashed youth, a second chance at perfection. I, on the other hand, was the family's designated shock absorber. From the time I was 14, I was expected to manage the emotional and financial overflow of the Harrison household. While Rachel was gifted a brand new BMW for her high school graduation, I was handed a ledger. I started working at a local bakery at 15, and by the time I was 16, my mother began charging me room and board. She claimed it was to teach me financial responsibility. It took me years of therapy to realize she was just draining my resources to fund Rachel's lifestyle. I paid for my own clothes, my own college tuition, and, on more than one occasion, I quietly covered the minimum payments on my parents' credit cards when my father's firm downsized. The breaking point didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing erosion of my boundaries that culminated in Rachel's engagement to a man named Greg Sullivan. Greg was a slick, fast-talking investment banker who drove a leased Porsche and looked at our family like we were a stepping stone. My mother was obsessed with him. She saw the upcoming wedding as the social event of the decade, a chance to outshine every other family in Oak Brook. There was only one problem. My parents were secretly drowning in debt. The facade was finally cracking. 2 weeks before the voicemail, I was summoned to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I should have known it was a trap. The dining room table was set with the good china, and my mother had poured me a glass of expensive Cabernet before I even took off my coat. "Chloe, darling," my mother began, her voice dripping with that manufactured sweetness she only used when she wanted something. "We need to talk about Rachel's wedding in Tuscany." I took a slow sip of my wine, bracing myself. "What about it, Mom?" "Well, Greg's family is flying in first class, and we simply can't look like paupers next to them. The floral arrangements alone are running over $20,000, and the venue requires a final deposit by Friday." She reached across the table, her manicured fingers brushing my wrist. "We need you to contribute." "Contribute?" I repeated, my stomach twisting into a cold, tight knot. "Yes, we know you've been saving aggressively since you got your promotion at the logistics firm. We need $30,000, Chloe. Consider it your wedding gift to your sister." I stared at her. $30,000. It was exactly the amount I had painstakingly saved over the last 4 years for a down payment on a modest townhouse. It was my escape fund. It was my future. "No," I said. The word dropped onto the dining room table like a lead weight. My father, who had been hiding behind his iPad, suddenly looked up. Rachel, who was sitting across from me scrolling through her phone, scoffed loudly. "Excuse me?" my mother snapped, the sweetness instantly evaporating from her tone. I said, "No, Mom. That money is for my house. I'm not giving it to you to pay for imported hydrangeas in Italy." What followed was the most explosive argument of my life. My mother's face morphed into a mask of pure, venomous rage. She called me selfish. She called me an ungrateful brat who was trying to sabotage her sister's happiness out of pure jealousy. Rachel joined in, crying dramatically on cue, wailing that I was ruining her life. My father, true to form, simply sighed and muttered, "Chloe, just do what your mother asks. Don't cause a scene." I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. I realized in that moment that I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a bank account. I was a tool to be used until I was empty. "I'm done," I said, my voice trembling but surprisingly clear. "I'm not giving you a dime, and I'm not going to the wedding." I grabbed my coat and walked out the front door. My mother followed me down the driveway, her voice rising to a hysterical screech, threatening to disown me, threatening to cut me out of the family entirely. I got into my 10-year-old Honda Civic and drove away without looking back. I spent the next 2 weeks in strict no-contact mode. I ignored their texts. I screened their calls. I was grieving the family I never really had, crying myself to sleep in my cramped apartment. Then, on a rainy Tuesday night at 9:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. A voicemail from my mother. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen for 10 minutes before I finally pressed play. The audio crackled, and then her voice filled the silent room. She wasn't yelling anymore. She sounded terrifyingly calm, utterly devoid of warmth or maternal instinct. Chloe, since you have decided to turn your back on this family in our time of need, we are washing our hands of you. You are dead to us. Do not call, do not come by the house. We don't need you. We will live without you. Enjoy your pathetic, lonely life. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the words carving themselves into my chest. We don't need you. It was the final severing of the cord. I wept until I was hollow, mourning the mother who had just buried me alive over a wedding deposit. Finally, around 2 a.m., I forced myself to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, plug it into the charger, and close my eyes. I accepted that I was now entirely on my own in the world. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to a gray, overcast morning. My eyes were swollen, my head throbbing with the distinct, dull ache of a crying hangover. I rolled over, the memory of the voicemail hitting me like a physical blow to the ribs. I took a deep, shaky breath, mentally preparing myself to face a life completely detached from the Harrison family. I reached for my phone to check my work emails. When I tapped the screen, the lock screen didn't just light up, it practically hyperventilated. The notifications were stacked so densely that the phone lagged as I scrolled. 76 missed calls. My heart slammed against my ribs. I sat up so fast the room spun. I blinked, convinced I was hallucinating from lack of sleep, but the numbers were glaringly real. Mom, mobile, 24, missed calls. Dad, mobile, 18 missed calls. Rachel, mobile, 29, missed calls. Aunt Susan, 3 missed calls. Home landline, 2 missed calls. The first call had come in at 3:12 a.m., just hours after my mother had left her vitriolic "We'll live without you" voicemail. The calls had continued relentlessly, escalating in frequency around 5 a.m. Beneath the missed calls were a barrage of text messages. I opened my messages app, my hands shaking violently. 3:15 a.m. Mom, Chloe, pick up the phone right now. This isn't funny. 3:42 a.m. Dad, Chloe, we have an emergency. Please call us immediately. 4:05 a.m. Rachel, where are you? Pick up the fucking phone, schlo. 4:30 a.m. Mom. Please, sweetheart. Mommy is so sorry about the voicemail. I didn't mean it. I was just stressed. Please answer. We are in terrible trouble. 5:15 a.m. Rachel, Greg left. The police are coming. CHLOE, please. 5:45 a.m. Dad. If you don't call us back in 10 minutes, I'm driving to your apartment. I stopped breathing. The police? Greg left? My mind raced through a dozen catastrophic scenarios. Had there been a car accident? Did someone break into the house? But no. Rachel's text said Greg left. And my father mentioned the police. This wasn't a medical emergency. This was a meltdown. For a brief, agonizing second, the ingrained trauma response of my childhood screamed at me to call them back, to rush over there and fix whatever mess they had created. That was my role. I was the crisis manager. I was the fixer. But then I remembered the cold, dead tone of my mother's voice just hours earlier. We don't need you. I set the phone face down on my mattress and walked into the kitchen to make coffee. My hands were trembling so badly, I spilled grounds all over the counter, but I forced myself to go through the motions. I poured a cup, black, and sat at my tiny 2-seater dining table. At 7 a.m., my phone began to vibrate against the bedroom nightstand. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, it vibrated again. It was Aunt Susan. Aunt Susan was my father's sister, and unlike my parents, she actually possessed a moral compass. She lived a few towns over, and usually stayed out of my mother's line of fire. If Susan was calling, the situation was completely off the rails. I picked up the phone. Hello? Oh, thank God, Aunt Susan exhaled. She sounded out of breath, frantic. Chloe, honey, are you safe? Are you at your apartment? I'm fine, Aunt Susan. I'm at home. What is going on? I woke up to 76 missed calls. Chloe, listen to me very carefully. Susan's voice dropped to a hushed, urgent whisper. Do not answer their calls. Do not go to their house. Have they contacted you about the business loan? What business loan? I asked, completely bewildered. Mom asked me for 30 grand for Rachel's wedding 2 weeks ago, and I said no. We haven't spoken since, until she left me a voicemail last night disowning me. Aunt Susan let out a dark, bitter laugh. She disowned you because she thought she had gotten away with it, Chloe. She thought the paperwork had cleared. Susan, what are you talking about? 6 months ago, Joanne took out a second mortgage on the Oakbrook house, Susan explained, her words rushing out in a terrifying torrent. But they were already over-leveraged. Their credit is garbage, Chloe. Richard's firm is restructuring. He hasn't brought in a full paycheck in months. So, to get the money for Rachel's wedding, and to keep up appearances, Joanne applied for a massive $150,000 commercial line of credit. How? I interrupted. No bank would approve them for that. They wouldn't, Susan said grimly. But they would approve you. The bottom fell out of my stomach. The room seemed to tilt sideways. No, she couldn't have. She used your social security number, Chloe. She forged your signature. She listed you as the primary guarantor on the loan, using your immaculate credit score and your position at the logistics firm to push it through. She thought she could just make the minimum payments with the second mortgage money until Greg married Rachel, and then they were going to ask Greg to bail them out. I felt nauseous. The air in my apartment suddenly felt too thin to breathe. My own mother had stolen my identity to finance a fake, lavish life for my sister. Why are they panicking now? I choked out, gripping the edge of the kitchen table so hard my knuckles turned white. Because the bank's fraud department flagged the account yesterday afternoon, Susan revealed. The bank tried to call you to verify a massive withdrawal Joanne tried to make for the Italian venue. When they couldn't reach you, they froze the accounts and called the house to demand that you, the primary account holder, come into the branch in person with 2 forms of ID. Joanne panicked. She tried to tell the bank you were out of the country. The voicemail. We don't need you. We'll live without you. She had left that voicemail thinking she had already stolen the money. She thought she didn't need my $30,000 because she had successfully stolen $150,000 in my name. But she hadn't anticipated the fraud alert. And Greg? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Greg is a shark, Chloe. When the accounts froze, one of Rachel's wedding vendors called Greg directly because Joanne's checks bounced. Greg did some digging, realized your parents are entirely bankrupt, and found out about the fraud. He packed his bags at 2 a.m. last night, called off the wedding, and told Rachel he isn't marrying into a family of felons. He's gone. I closed my eyes. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal was paralyzing. The bank gave your mother a deadline of 9 a.m. this morning to produce you in person at the branch, Aunt Susan continued. If you don't show up and verify that loan, the bank is dispatching the police to the house for identity theft and wire fraud. That's why they called you 76 times, Chloe. They don't want to make amends. They are trying to keep Joanne out of federal prison. I stared at the wall of my kitchen. For 26 years, I had been the family punching bag. I had been told I was worthless, selfish, and unneeded. Just 8 hours ago, my mother had declared they could live without me. Aunt Susan? I said, my voice suddenly very calm, stripping away the panic and replacing it with something cold and hard. Yes, honey. I'm going to take a shower, I said, and then I'm going to make some eggs. And at 9:01 a.m., I am going to walk into the local police precinct and report a $150,000 case of identity theft. Good girl, Aunt Susan whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Protect yourself. Let them burn. I hung up the phone. My screen lit up again. Incoming call. Mom. I watched it ring. I watched the name flash on the screen over and over until it went to voicemail. The power dynamic in our family had just flipped entirely, and as I walked toward the bathroom to start my day, I realized I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I was the executioner. I dressed with meticulous care. I put on a tailored navy blazer, crisp black trousers, and my favorite loafers. It felt like I was putting on armor for a war I hadn't started, but one I was absolutely going to finish. I bypassed my usual coffee shop and drove straight to the 14th District Police Precinct in downtown Oak Brook. The air inside the precinct was sterile, smelling of bad coffee and floor wax. I walked up to the front desk, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were completely steady. "I need to report a massive case of identity theft and bank fraud," I told the desk sergeant. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a weary-looking investigator named Detective Miller. He had a graying mustache and a desk piled high with manila folders. At first, he looked at me like I was just another suburbanite disputing a stolen credit card. But when I pulled up the emails, Aunt Susan had forwarded me the frantic communications from the bank's fraud department detailing the $150,000 commercial line of credit. His posture changed immediately. "Your mother opened this?" Detective Miller asked, his pen pausing over his notepad. "Yes, Joanne Harrison, and she did it using my social security number, forging my signature on the electronic documents. The bank is demanding I come in to verify a withdrawal this morning by 9 a.m. I am here to tell you that I did not authorize this account. I have never seen this money, and I want to press full charges." Miller leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Miss Harrison, I have to be clear with you. If you file this official report, this isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a federal crime. Wire fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud of this magnitude carries mandatory prison time. Once I put this in the system and contact the bank's fraud division, you cannot pull it back. Are you prepared for your mother to be arrested?" I thought of the voicemail. "You are dead to us." "Print the paperwork, detective," I said. "I'll sign wherever you need me to." It took nearly 2 hours to finalize the initial report, freeze my credit bureau profiles, and officially flag the fraudulent accounts with the bank. By the time I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the precinct to walk back to my car, the overcast morning had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. I was fishing my keys out of my purse when a black Lexus SUV swerved aggressively into the precinct parking lot, its tires screeching against the wet pavement. It parked diagonally across 2 handicapped spaces. My stomach plummeted. It was my parents. The doors flew open, and Joanne, Richard, and Rachel piled out. They looked entirely unhinged. My mother, usually a vision of Botoxed perfection and designer cashmere, had her hair in a frantic, messy knot. She was wearing yesterday's clothes. Rachel's mascara was smeared down her cheeks, making her look like a deranged raccoon. "Chloe!" my mother shrieked, sprinting across the asphalt. She grabbed my arm with a terrifying, bruising grip. "What are you doing here? Tell me you didn't go inside." I yanked my arm away, taking a large step backward. "Do not touch me." "Chloe, listen to me," my father interjected, stepping forward. He looked 10 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. "The bank gave us until 9 a.m. It's 11:30. They called Joanne's cell and said the account was locked due to an active police investigation. You have to go back in there and tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave us permission." I stared at the man who was supposed to protect me. "You want me to lie to the police? You want me to tell a detective that I authorized a $150,000 loan I knew nothing about?" "It's the only way to save the family," Rachel wailed, stomping her foot like a toddler. "Greg is gone, Chloe. He left me. Because of you." "Because of me?" I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed across the empty parking lot. "Greg left you because you are broke, Rachel. He left because Mom and Dad are criminals, and he didn't want to get dragged into the blast radius." "How dare you?" my mother hissed, her eyes wild, cornered animal panic radiating from her. She suddenly dropped her hostile tone, morphing instantly into a weeping, pathetic victim. She fell to her knees right there on the wet pavement. "Please, Chloe, Mommy is begging you. They'll take the house. They'll put me in jail. Just sign the papers at the bank. We'll pay it back, I swear on my life. We will pay you back every month." "With what money, Mom?" I asked coldly. "Dad's firm is restructuring. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. You were going to use Greg's money to pay it off, but Greg ran for the hills. If I claim that loan, I am on the hook for $150,000. My life will be over." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice to a desperate whisper. "Chloe, you're young. You can declare bankruptcy. It will fall off your credit in 7 years. But if your mother goes to prison, she won't survive it. Take the fall for us. You owe us that much for raising you." The sheer audacity of his request knocked the wind out of me. He wasn't asking me to help them, he was asking me to throw my entire future onto a grenade to save his wife from the consequences of her own felonies. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened my audio files, turned the volume all the way up, and pressed play on the voicemail she had left me just 12 hours earlier. Since you have decided to turn your back on this family, you are dead to us. We don't need you. We will live without you. Enjoy your pathetic, lonely life. My mother's recorded voice echoed in the rainy parking lot. When the audio finished, dead silence fell over the three of them. My mother, still on her knees, stared at me with wide, horrified eyes. You said you could live without me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but laced with absolute steel. So, start living. I turned my back on them, got into my Honda, and locked the doors. My mother scrambled up and slammed her hands against my window, screaming something I couldn't hear over the engine. I put the car in reverse, backed out, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The fallout was rapid, public, and catastrophic. Because my mother had used electronic wires across state lines to pay the Italian wedding vendors with the stolen funds, the case quickly escalated from local police to federal investigators. 2 weeks after the confrontation in the parking lot, Joanne Harrison was arrested. She was handcuffed right in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon HOA meeting in our neighborhood clubhouse. Aunt Susan later told me that 3 different neighbors had recorded it on their phones. My father, desperate to save his own skin, immediately filed for divorce, claiming he had absolutely no knowledge of the fraudulent loan. The investigators didn't buy it, but because Joanne had forged the digital signatures herself, she took the brunt of the criminal charges. The Oak Brook house went into foreclosure within 3 months. The illusion of the Harrison family wealth completely evaporated, leaving behind a mountain of debt and public humiliation. As for Rachel, the golden child finally had to face reality. Without my parents to fund her lifestyle, and without Greg's deep pockets, she was forced to move into a tiny, run-down apartment complex in a neighboring town. Aunt Susan told me she had to take a job working the cosmetics counter at a mid-tier department store to make rent. Every time she reached out to me on social media, begging for money, or blaming me for ruining her life, I simply blocked the new account. I never went to the trial. I didn't need to. Joanne accepted a plea deal to avoid a lengthy public spectacle. She was sentenced to 4 years in a minimum security federal facility, plus mandatory restitution to the bank. As for me, I kept my $30,000. 6 months after the arrest, I closed on a beautiful, sunlit townhouse on the other side of the state. It had a small garden, a modern kitchen, and most importantly, it was entirely mine. Aunt Susan came over on my first night in the new house. We sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating takeout pizza and drinking cheap champagne out of paper cups. You know, Susan said gently, looking around the pristine, quiet room, you saved your own life. I smiled, taking a sip of the bubbling wine. I had spent 26 years believing I was the broken one in the family. I had spent my life twisting myself into knots to earn the love of a mother who only saw me as a commodity. It took her trying to destroy my future for me to realize that I was never the problem. That night, after Susan left, I lay in my new bed. The house was perfectly silent. There were no screaming matches, no passive-aggressive demands, no frantic phone calls, just peace. I pulled up my phone, scrolled to my saved messages, and found the voicemail one last time. I didn't listen to it. I just hit delete. Then I turned off my lamp, closed my eyes, and for the first time in my entire life, I slept through the night without waking up once. Have you ever had to walk away from toxic family members to save yourself? It's the hardest decision you'll ever make, but sometimes letting them face the consequences of their own actions is the only way to break the cycle. Drop a comment below and share your own survival story. If you found the strength in Chloe's journey, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real-life stories.